Okay, we got a look ahead to this weekend, the big one, the SEC on CBS. #1 Alabama at Florida. We can tell you it is a sellout in the swamp. Dan Mullen, as you mentioned on your podcast, doesn't mind being yelled at. He's still going with Emory Jones over Anthony Richardson. Give us your preview of this game.
For me, it comes down to turnovers. I mean, that is one thing that is really hurting Florida right now is those 4 interceptions. It's one of the reasons why so many Florida fans are calling for Anthony Richardson, because you've gone up against Florida Atlantic and South Florida, teams that Florida should be able to beat handily without any mistakes. So we've seen some mistakes. And it's big because guess who's #1 in the SEC in turnover margin? It is the Alabama Crimson Tide. They don't turn the ball over. Bryce Young has 7 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. The Alabama defense has picked off opposing quarterbacks 4 times, and they've got a fumble recovery. So I just think that if you're going to be Florida and you want to hang in this game and get it to the 4th quarter in a way that you can ride the energy and the confidence that you can get from a loud Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, well, then you can't shoot yourself in the foot. You can't have self-inflicted wounds. And against one of the defenses that is the best in the SEC at turning you over and setting up the offense with short fields, you just cannot have those same kinds of mistakes. So that, to me, is probably one of the biggest storylines, in addition to, of course, the quarterbacks, Emory Jones and Anthony Richardson for the Gators.
Chip, Alabama has been just so far ahead of everybody else this season. This is the closest spread we've seen for them so far, 15.5 on the road, over under 58 and a hook. What is your play in this game?
Bama, don't look back. I mean, just would play up to 17. You know, maybe nab it right now just because this line might be moving. If you wait till right before a kickoff, you know, when you're sitting there watching the pregame show here on CBS Sports HQ, this thing might be 17.5. I just think that Alabama has such a massive advantage, especially in some of these games, because Alabama seems to start every single season with a 3-month head start. I mean, by the end of the season, there might be teams that are good enough to hang with Bama. We saw Florida at the end of the season, you know, take Alabama almost the distance in the SEC championship game. But this team does not have a replacement for Kyle Pitts right now, does not have a replacement for Kadarius Toney right now, Trevon Grimes. I just don't think that they can cause the same kind of problems that Florida offense did in that SEC championship game. So I'm afraid for Dan Mullen, it's going to be 0-11 against Alabama. And I think that for Alabama, this will be yet another cover for the Crimson Tide.
We talked a lot about James Franklin earlier. Let's talk about his team. We get Auburn ranked 22nd right now, heading to Penn State right now 10th. Auburn has had 2 pretty easy games, home games so far this season. They are now heading to a very loud, a very hostile Happy Valley. Penn State favored by 6 at home. The over-under here is 53. Where do we put our money in this game, Chip?
Attack the total and go under because we have 2 very talented rosters and 2 very limited quarterbacks. For Penn State, Sean Clifford has been able to hit some big plays when the Nittany Lions needed him, especially in that game on the road against Wisconsin. It was great to see him not revert back to some of the same mistakes prior in his career, which is that when he goes on the road, he starts throwing interceptions. He starts turning the ball over. He hit Jahan Dotson for the big play that Penn State needed. That's great. He also missed Jahan Dotson a lot. And there were a lot of opportunities where Penn State probably could have run the score up on Wisconsin and not had that be such a close game in the 4th quarter. But the limitations for Sean Clifford really keep a ceiling on what that offense can be. The same can be said for Bo Nix and Auburn. So I look at 2 quarterbacks who are not bad. They are both good Power 5 starters, worthy of being Power 5 starters. But I still think that their own limitations make this under a great call. Both defenses are very, very good, very athletic. No one's going to run away from the other team. This is going to be played way closer to that Penn State-Wisconsin kind of battle, with both teams relying on defense and maybe even being happy to play field position.
Chip, really quickly, your team on upset alert. Not a lot of surprise here. Notre Dame at home again this weekend, hosting an undefeated Purdue team. Tell us why you are putting the Fighting Irish on upset alert.
I just think that this Notre Dame offense has not yet really been able to do the thing that it did so well during its college football playoff push a year ago, and that's overwhelm opponents right at the line of scrimmage. The run game with Kyron Williams, Chris Tyree, that was a 1-2 punch that coming into the season I thought could be among the best in the country. And yet it really has had to be a lot more of Jack Cohn trying to get things done through the passing game. And so I look at this Purdue team, which has a lot of confidence, a true game breaker in wide receiver David Bell, and I think that the Boilermakers would love to be able to notch this in-state upset. It would just be a launching pad for this season after having so much disappointment. Rondale Moore's injury, they couldn't get past in that weird COVID season that the Big Ten had. I think that if Purdue could win this game, then all of a sudden we start to take them more seriously as a contender with Wisconsin and Iowa in the Big Ten West. So I'm going to put the Boilermakers in a spot because it's a prove-it moment for them, and Notre Dame's looking a little bit shaky. So upset alert for the Fighting Irish.
I saw that 7 this morning. I was like, I'll put some money on that in favor of Purdue. Chip Patterson, thanks so much for joining us here on HQ to go through all of that going on in the world of college football. By the way, Chip, the host of the Cover 3 podcast, make sure to download and follow. I got to tell you, if I'm not watching games right now, I am listening to the Cover 3 podcast. They have amazing episodes up right now recapping exactly what went on last week. 2 episodes about that, in fact. And then, of course, the emergency podcast talking about who could potentially replace Clay Helton.
Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.